this stuff pretty well. The parts we tend to forget are the next ones, all right? So we're going to move over to Canada getting ready for the war. This is where I use the 9/11 example, because you've grown up after 9/11. What did Canada have to do after 9/11? There were two things that we needed to do as we got ready to go to, if you will, war in Afghanistan. What are we worried about? I can't wait forever. Getting our army ready, arming our army, and creating, you go into an airport? Security at home. Now don't worry about airports then, but we still had to create security at home. So let's talk about getting ready. They needed to get the army together, right? So they need troops. How do you get troops? Well, you use propaganda. Did they have to use a lot of propaganda to get Canadian soldiers excited about going to war? No, they were gonna, they didn't want to miss it. Are you kidding? They get to go kick some butt, be a Canadian soldier. Yeah, so propaganda didn't need too much at the beginning. They get worse at the end. They thought they'd be home by Christmas, they thought. And who was in charge of getting them ready and putting them together? Sam Hughes. Oh, Sam. Hopefully nobody is related to Sam Hughes is watching online, because they won't like us to say that basically Sam Hughes was incompetent and, corrupt. Other than that, he was fine. Hughes was in charge of getting them ready. What kind of examples do we think of when we think of Hughes about how he screwed up? Ross rifle and cardboard boots. You know about the Ross rifle, really good sniper's rifle, really good on the target range as long as you didn't have to fire it more than once, and as long as it didn't get dirty. Perfect for trench warfare. And of course cardboard boots. What could be better than somebody who's given you boots where the soles are made of cardboard and you're going to be in trenches in northern France and Belgium? Excellent. Really good for trench foot, I'm told. So Hughes, of course, is known for those things. He also insisted that the army be trained in English only. People in Quebec and other parts of Canada who speak French will be extremely happy about that possibility. So getting ready. Now the next part of getting ready isn't just getting the army. They had lots of people volunteer. It's also to create security at home. And to create security at home, they use something called the War Measures Act. And if you're in my semester class, just 2 weeks ago, actually just a week ago, we talked about this, who used it in Quebec. Trudeau would use it in Quebec during the October crisis. The same War Measures Act that was used in World War I. It took away people's rights, allowed the army to act as police, and in World War I, they took on enemy aliens, and in World War I, enemy aliens were Germans and Austrian-Hungarian. People from Austria, Hungary, or Austria and Hungary. Some people ended up, especially in Alberta, in camps, because there were a lot of people living on the prairies who've been brought to Canada because they were great farmers from those areas, right? From Eastern Europe. Ukrainians ended up, a lot of these people ended up in camps because they were considered enemy aliens. We changed the name of one of our towns from Berlin, right, to Kitchener, Ontario. So security was created through War Measures Act and these things. That's getting ready. This is the start of the war. What was happening in Canada during the war? So what was life like for regular Canadians during the war? Did you have everything you wanted? What did they do? It's different about World War I than maybe the war in Afghanistan over here. Rationing, really good. Rationing, and we talked about, was it meatless Fridays and fuelless Sundays, right? So they rationed, they actually cut back, and there used to be more material available for people in France and soldiers in France and in England. Rationing, they had to pay for the war. How did they pay for the war? Because they paid for all this stuff. Victory bonds. And thank goodness that what else they did was temporary. What was temporary? Income tax. Excellent. They had temporary income tax. It's still temporary, one hopes. Temporary income tax to pay for the war. So they had to pay for the war. So people were rationing, victory bonds. What else was happening? What was happening with people like women? They were working. Women are working. Wars are good for the economy, right? You were building lots of stuff, and women needed to take some of those jobs. It's really going to change life for women. During the war, the rationing, women were working. They start running out of troops. We bring in something called conscription. Now that's later. The Prime Minister at the time, what was his name? It's a hard question. Borden. Borden. Yeah, I know my answer is always either Mackenzie King or Trudeau, but in this case, it's a guy named Robert Borden. And they bring in conscription. He didn't want conscription for a long time, and then he decided he had to have it because they ran out of volunteers. How are they forcing people to volunteer? How are women getting people to volunteer? They're giving them something. White feathers. Forgot about that. I'm sure everybody online can read this good, all right? White feather. So yeah, the white feather routine. I wouldn't expect anything on that on an exam. It's nice for you to know. You might be able to roll that out on an essay depending on what it's about. But it's good. Conscription. Who's going to be angry about conscription? French Canadians. 2 reasons they're angry. Trained in English and not really a war for Canada. It was really a war for Britain. So conscription creates anger in Quebec. And he has an election. Because everybody remember like this election. This is really hard. The khaki election. All based around conscription. And in the khaki election, he created something called, if they want to get really picky, it was called the Union Government, where everybody was in favor of conscription got together. And he allowed some people to vote. Who did he let vote? People who were related to guys at the front. Everybody at the front, including First Nations and women nurses at the front. Not everybody could vote, but he allowed some to vote, and he took vote away from Austrians and Germans and people who were opposed to the war. So it was called the khaki election. Anyhow, and of course, because of it, they end up winning. So the Borden and his government wins. I'm going to pause now.